The wind came down from the ridge like a warning. It carried with it the last breath of daylight and the bitter scent of juniper smoke, thin and sharp in the throat. Snow had crusted over the field behind the cabin, but beneath it, the ground was still soft, still shifting. The wood pile was nearly gone. What little food remained had to be rationed by feel more than measure. She had not counted it precisely in days. There was no need. A mother knew when the end was near, even if her children did not. They slept, all 6 of them, in one room now, huddled under stitched-together quilts that barely held in the warmth. The littlest, Ruthie, had taken to coughing in her sleep, not a deep, sick cough, just the kind that made a mother sit up to fast, hold her breath too long. That night again she had sat awake until the fire went out, until the dark took the edges of everything, even the walls. Her hands were cracked and stained with ash, her apron stiff from the starch of too many wiped noses and a few washings. There was a raw place on her thumb from the axe handle she had missed once and split her skin clean open. She kept it wrapped in cloth, though it bled when she worked too hard, which was most hours of the day. The ache in her back had grown into a constant, dull burn, as if something inside her had curled up and was trying to die there quietly. Outside, the plain stretched flat and colorless under a low gray sky, the kind of sky that pressed down on a person's spirit until even prayers seemed like wasted breath. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, not for warmth, but because it felt like holding something still. Her eyes scanned the distance, though she no longer expected anything to come from it. The road had not brought help in over for months. Just the last of the letters, one from her brother in Kansas, sorry for the silence, times were hard, and one from the land agent reminding her that debts did not mourn the dead. The wind shifted again. This time it brought sound with it, a hollow rhythm, too steady to be the wind itself. Hoofbeats maybe, distant, faint. She didn't move. Could have been the horses from the north pasture, though they rarely came close anymore. Still, her body knew before her mind caught up. That bone-deep stillness, a pause that animals take before something unnatural enters their space. She stepped out into the yard, boots crunching into the packed snow. No coat. She didn't notice the cold right away. The ache in her hands distracted her from the sting in her cheeks. She stared out toward the trail that cut through the cottonwoods, bare and crooked now like old men in a story. Nothing moved at first. The trees stood silent, brittle. Then a shape. A horse dark against the white. A man slouched low in the saddle. She couldn't say why her stomach turned like it did. Just that something shifted in her, something half hope, half warning. No one came down that road without a reason. As he drew closer, she could make out the tilt of his hat, the way he rode like he wasn't made to sit still for long. His coat was dusted with snow, the brim of his hat low, hiding his face. But he didn't come fast. He was lost. He knew where he was going, and she did not like that. Behind her, the cabin door creaked open. "Ma?" It was Caleb, her oldest, just shy of 12, though taller than most boys that age. His voice still held a child's uncertainty. "Inside," she said, without turning. "Get the kettle on." He didn't argue. He never did. Not since his father died. The man pulled his horse up just before the fence. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at her through the hush, snow still falling soft as ash around him. His face was sun-worn, unshaven, eyes the kind that didn't blink much. He nodded once. "Evening, Mum." She didn't answer. He seemed to weigh something in his mind, then said, "Heard there was a widow living out here. Thought I might see if you needed anything." She let her arms fall to her sides, the ache in her thumb flaring as she did. "We don't need charity. I don't offer charity." His voice was low, slow. "Just work. Trade if you've got something needing done." The silence between them stretched. The wind stirred a curl of hair loose from her braid and blew it across her mouth. She looked at the horse, looked at the man, then back at the darkening road behind him. "You any good with a saw?" He nodded. "Better with an axe." She turned toward the cabin. "Then come in, but wipe your boots." The inside of the cabin held the scent of boiled potatoes, smoke, and the faint soreness of wet wool drying close to the fire. The stranger stepped in slow, as if testing the air, his hat in his hands. His eyes swept the room walls patched with old newspapers, a low shelf lined with chipped dishes, a table worn thin from elbows and hard days. His gaze rested on the children just long enough to note them, then moved on. That earned him a fragment of hurt rust. Caleb stood by the stove, trying to act older than he was. He stoked the fire to a bright pulse, steam already rising from the kettle. The man nodded once at the boy. Evening. Caleb said nothing, but his hand drifted closer to the carving knife on the table. The stranger glanced at the blade and gave the ghost of a smile. Wise. She motioned toward the corner near the hearth. You can set your things there. I don't keep spare rooms. He didn't argue, just unrolled his bundle, an oilskin pack, an extra shirt, a coil of rope, a knife and a tooled sheath. She noticed the lack of anything soft. No blanket, no bedroll. A man not planning on comfort. I didn't get your name, she said. You didn't. He crouched by the fire, palm out to it like a man greeting an old friend. It's Ward, Mrs. Ilna Hargrove, she said, more formally than she felt. Those are my children. Fine ones. They're hungry more often than not. But I reckon that's normal. He didn't respond to that. Just nodded once, then looked at the stove. You got wood? Bet. You got enough for the week? She hesitated. No. He stood. Then you'll start with that. She watched him go out the door without coat or complaint. She followed him with her eyes through the frost-fogged window as he moved to the stump, gathered the axe. He didn't swing right away. He stood there first, like a man listening to the wood, deciding where to break it. Then he raised the axe and brought it down clean. Again, and again. It was almost dark by the time he came back in, sweat on his brow, cheeks red from cold. His shirt clung to his back. His breath showed white when he spoke. You'll want to stack that before the snow turns it to stone. I will. He nodded, and that was the end of it. Later, once the children were down lined up like spoons across the mattress, she ladled him a bowl of stew. Thin stuff, but hot. He took it without thanks, as though he knew what a thing cost a woman to offer. They sat at the table, neither one speaking for a long while. The wind keened outside, high and long, like something lost was calling. He set his spoon down first. You out here alone since autumn? Yes. Your man, he passed recent? June. Sorry. She nodded. She didn't say thank you. Grief had worn her to thin for politeness. He looked at the wall beside her, at the photograph tacked there, her husband, stiff in his Sunday coat, his arm heavy across her shoulders. The photo had begun to curl at the edges. He was a blacksmith? She blinked. Yes, and before that he was a drunk. But he was a father first. What didn't look away? You loved him. I endured him. Then I loved him. Then I lost him. The kettle began to hiss. She rose, poured the hot water into the wash basin, and soaked a cloth for her hands. The burn in her thumb throbbed again. You should clean that proper, he said. She didn't answer. He pushed his chair back slow. You'll sleep by the fire. You'll be cold. I've been colder. She nodded once, went to the children. She brushed the hair from Ruthia's face, adjusted the blanket over Emma's shoulders. When she turned back, Ward was already curled on the floor, one arm over his eyes, his breath deepening into sleep. She stood in the doorway between rooms and watched him a moment longer than she meant to. It had been many months since a man's presence had filled the cabin with anything but dread. That night, the wind died down, and the fire held longer than it should have. Subscribe, and let the journey keep unfolding. The next morning brought a hard frost, the kind that turned every breath into smoke and made the chickens hesitant to leave their roost. Elnar rose before the children, as she always did. The light hadn't yet touched the eastern windows, and the silence of the house felt heavier with a second adult sleeping under its roof. She moved quietly, her feet bare against the cold plank floor. The fire had gone out again, though Ward had banked it the night before. Still, a thin line of warmth lingered near the ashes, like breath on a mirror. Ward was already sitting up when she stepped into the room. He hadn't made a sound. You sleep? She asked, voice low. He nodded, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Enough. She started the fire without asking him to help, knowing full well he was watching her movements. The way she bent, the way her hands favored one side. She didn't hide her pain anymore. There was no one to perform for. No reason to pretend she was worn down to the root. The children began to stir not long after. Small feet hit the floor. I cough. Then too. Ruthie again. I yell, and his stomach tightened. Ward rose and moved to the door without a word, pulling on his coat as he went. He left the cabin, boots thudding against the frozen earth, and the sound gave her a strange kind of comfort. Not softness, something steadier, like the low creak of a wagon wheel that hadn't broken yet. He came back later with 2 rabbits, hung them outside to bleed, then got to work on the fence that had sagged in the east pasture. He didn't ask which chores needed doing. He saw. That was the thing about him. He watched, he saw, and then he acted. By noon, she found him oiling the hinges on the shed, brow furrowed like it mattered. You looking to be hired on? She asked, arms crossed. I'm looking to stay busy. You running from something? He kept working. No, just running. The way he said it flat with no edge made her chest tighten. She knew that kind of running. The kind that didn't end when you stopped moving. He paused, wiped his hands on a rag. You ever hire help before? Once. He drank more than he were. I don't drink. I've heard that before. He nodded like he agreed with her now, then said, give me 1 day's worth of food. He'll earn it before dark. If you're not satisfied, he'll be on my way by morning. And if I am, then he'll ask for a 2nd day. She looked past him toward the hills that rose soft and snow-capped in the distance. The air smelled of pine and cold iron. Something old stirred in her, the stubborn part, the part that had carried her through childbirth, burial, and every winter since. Fine, she said. You can stay. He nodded once, nothing more. That evening after supper, the children gathered near the fire. Caleb pulled out the old deck of worm cards, and the younger ones watched as he dealt slow, deliberate hands no one really knew how to play. Ward sat close, not too close, hands resting loose in his lap. When Ruthie sneezed again, Ilna noticed the faint crease in his brow. Later, once they were tucked in, she sat with a piece of mending in her lap, eyes heavy, needle slow. Ward spoke first. You ever think of leaving? She didn't answer right away. Every day, she said. But the only thing harder than staying is starting over with 6 mouths and no map. He nodded. You? She asked. I left something behind. Don't know if it's worth going back for. She looked at him, really looked. What was it? He hesitated. A name. A place. A part of myself I didn't like much. The silence stretched between them like wire thin, taut, humming with everything unsaid. She tied off the thread in her lap. Well, she said, we've got work enough for 2 hands and quiet enough for a man to think, if you can take the cold. I've had worse, he said again. This time, she believed him. The fire burned steady. The children slept soundly, and outside, the wind changed direction just slightly, as though something in the air had begun to shift. The thaw came slow, almost grudging. The kind that left the earth slick with mud and the sky dull as tin. Snow melted in patches, exposing broken branches, hoarse droppings, and the bones of last summer's garden. The road softened too, turning to ruts so deep even a strong wagon would have grown. Ilna welcomed the mess. It meant the worst of winter was behind them. It also meant the work changed. No more chopping through frozen wood or shaking snow from the roof. Now it was fence repair, washing everything that smelled of smoke, patching clothes rubbed thin at the knees. All the work she used to do with her husband. All the work she had done alone for half a year. Now Ward was there. He didn't talk much. Didn't hover. He moved through the days with a quiet rhythm, like someone used to long silences and hard mornings. He fixed what needed fixing before she had to point at it. He never asked questions he didn't need the answers to. By mid-March, the children had taken to him not in a loud way, but in the way they stopped watching him with suspicion. They handed him things without being asked, let him lift them up to reach rafters. Ruthie even took his hand once when she slipped near the barn. Hed caught her easy, one arm around her waist, and set her back on her feet like it was nothing. But Allah had seen his face when he let go something tight, something scared, like the weight of her had struck him in a place he hadn't meant to feel. She noticed how he stood longer near the window some nights, how his eyes lingered on the mountains as if looking for a sign. Ched caught him once, early morning, kneeling by the fence with his head bowed, not in prayer exactly but close, like he was listening for something he didn't expect to hear back. Then one afternoon, while they were hauling hay from the upper shed, she asked, "You got people?" He shrugged. "Had a sister once. She married into a mess down in San Angelo. You don't write her?" "I wrote her once." "Didn't hear back. She might be gone. She might." He heaved another bale onto the sled. "Or she might be had enough of me." That night, while the children played quiet games in the corner, Ulna cleaned a dress she hadn't worn since her husband's burial. Dark blue with tiny white stitching. She didn't know why she did it. It wasn't about war. Or maybe it was a little. When she came out of her room, she found him carving something small by the fire. A horse whittled from pine. The wood was pale, the shape still rough, but it looked like it was meant to run. He looked up at her, startled. "You're dressed," he said. "I do that sometimes." He nodded, then held out the carving. "For the little one, Ruthie." She took it, turned it over in her hand. The legs weren't even, but it had a kind face. "She'll like it." "I hope so." They stood there quiet, while the fire crackled low behind them. The lamp on the table flickered once, casting her shadow across his chest. "You carve often?" she asked. "Used to, when my hands were steadier." "What changed?" He looked at her, and for a second he didn't blink. "I buried a man once. Not someone I hated, just someone I couldn't save." Ilna held his gaze. "You think I need saving?" "No," he said. "I think you already did that for yourself." She swallowed. The warmth of the fire seemed to press against her back like hands. "And what about you?" His mouth tightened, still working that out. Later, when the cabin was quiet and the moon slid silver across the floorboards, she found herself standing over the sleeping children, the carved horse tucked in beside Ruthie's small hand. She looked back toward the hearth. Ward was asleep again, one arm slung over his chest, lips parted just enough to show he dreamed like a man who never expected peace. And for the first time in many months, Ilna didn't feel like she was holding the night alone. April brought the kind of light that made the world look new, even if it was. The creek near the edge of the property ran fast and muddy, carrying broken branches in the thawed weight of winter. Birds returned in fits and bursts, red-winged blackbirds, finches, the occasional hawk tracing circles overhead. Ilna spent more time outside now, sleeves rolled to the elbow, arms brown from sun and labor. She planted potatoes, patched the garden fence, and scrubbed the porch until her knuckles ached. Work had always been the thing that kept her moving forward, even when she didn't know where forward was. Wood stayed, not just day to day, but in ways that changed the air. He took over the morning chores without being asked, sharpened every tool in the shed, taught Caleb how to set a proper snare. He showed Damus how to patch the roof with tar, and once, when Ruthie's cough returned, he rode into town without a word and came back with honey, willow bark, and a clean handkerchief folded like a gift. When she asked how H.E.D. paid for it, he only said, "I traded an old pair of boots." She never saw him without those same boots. At night, they sat closer, still not touching, still no words they weren't ready to say, but their silences changed. They were no longer made of distance. They felt like rest. One afternoon, the sky turned the color of ash and wind came whipping through the valley. Ilnoranda pulled sheets from the line while Ward chased down a chicken that had made a poor choice. Thunder roamed. The children huddled near the stove as the storm came down hard and sudden. Rain slammed the roof. Ilma lit the lamp and watched the windows fog. Then a knock came at the door. A man stood on the porch, soaked to the bone, eyes hollow, hat in hand. "Ilma," he said, like it was a name he used to know better. Her stomach dropped. She knew that voice. "Samuel?" she asked, stepping forward. He nodded. "It's me." She stared at him. Same lean frame, same brittle mouth. Her brother, last seen 2 winters ago, drunk and yelling, leaving behind a promise to send help he never did. "You said you'd do right," she said. "I tried," he lied. Ward stood behind her, still and quiet. She felt him there, steady as a beam. Samuel's eyes darted between them. "I came to see how you're redoing. Heard about Caleb taking on the man's work." Caleb appeared in the doorway, arms crossed like his mother's. He didn't say a word. Ilna stepped outside and closed the door behind her. Rain ran down her back. "What do you want?" she asked. Samuel looked off toward the shed, the hills, anywhere but her face. "I got nowhere else to go." She let that hang in the air. He always said that when he needed something, when his pockets were empty and his pride worn down just enough to ask. "We don't have room," she said. "I ain't asking for long. Just a place to sleep. Maybe help with spring roundup." "You could use the help." Ward opened the door behind her, then slow. He didn't speak, just waited. Samuel's face twitched. "Who's this?" "Ward," she said. Samuel scoffed. "You got a man here now. H.E.S. not yours to question." The silence cracked between them. "You gonna turn away your own kin?" Samuel asked, quieter now. "I've done worse," she said. "But I'll feed you. For tonight. After that we'll see." Ward didn't move from the door. Just nodded once and stepped aside to let her in. Samuel followed. Wet boots dripping. Eyes scanning everything with that old bitter twitch. Ilna served him the last of the good bread and poured him coffee without warmth. Ward didn't sit. Caleb didn't speak. And Ilna watched her brother eat, her jaw tight. That night, when the children slept and Samuel snored loud from the corner cot, Ward stood near the fire with his arms crossed. "You don't trust him," he said. "No. You want me to stay close?" She looked up at him. "I want you to stay." He nodded. "Then I will." The storm passed, but it left the air heavy. Change had come in the shape of family, and not all kin was a gift. By morning, the storm had wrung the sky dry. The air felt scraped clean, raw at the edges. Low clouds clung to the hills like they didn't want to leave. Inside the cabin, the smell of damp wool and old tension lingered heavier than the wood smoke. Samuel was already up, boots muddy, leaning against the doorframe like he belonged there. "Fence out, back's half fallen," he said, not quite looking at anyone. "He'll fix it." Elnon nodded once. "Tools are in the shed." He didn't thank her. Ward moved slow that morning, eyes sharp, hands steady. He poured Ruthie's tea with care, helped Amos dye a bootlace. But Elna saw the set of his jaw, the way he checked over his shoulder more often. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. By midday, she found Samuel behind the barn, smoking something cheap and sharp. "You come here to work or just to take up space?" she asked. He grinned without humor, still sharp as ever, "Still waiting for you to grow up." "I've been through more than you think," he muttered. She didn't answer, just turned to go. "You trust that man?" he called after her. "The one sleeping by your fire like he belongs here?" She faced him, arms crossed. "H.E.S. earned more trust in 2 months than you ever managed in 30 years. He flinched. "Not much, but enough." She walked away. That night, supper was quiet. Samuel chewed loud, talked too much, and when he was talking, he watched toward like a dog sizing up another for a fight that hadn't started yet. After the children went to bed, the men sat by the fire. Ilna stitched near the window, watching the thread pass through the fabric over and over again. Samuel finally spoke. "You were a soldier, weren't you?" Ward didn't answer. "I can tell. You sit like a man who's had to listen for bullets." Still, Ward said nothing. "Funny though," Samuel went on. "A man like you, drifting alone through ranch country, no badge, no papers, makes a person wonder." Ilna set her needle down. "Say what you came to say, Samuel." He smiled too wide. "I'm saying you don't know him." "I know enough." Ward stood slowly. "You want to fight? I won't give it to you." Samuel leaned back. "Just a question, friend. Who were you before you came here?" Ward looked down at his hands. "I was someone I had to leave behind." The fire crackled. Samuel scoffed and poured himself more coffee. When Ward stepped outside into the cold, Ilna followed. He stood near the edge of the porch, arms folded, face toward the trees. "I can ask him to go," she said. "You don't tell me that." "I'm not doing it for you." He turned to her, something fragile just under his voice. "You ever think maybe I did something unforgivable?" She looked at him. Really looked. Wind curled her hair around her neck, and she didn't move to brush it away. Every person who's walked through that door has done something they regret. But not everyone stays to fix it. He swallowed, jawed. I was a good man. Not always. I left someone behind, left her waiting. She died before I could get back. I buried her with my hands. I never said goodbye. Ilna stepped closer. You think working on fences and hauling would make up for that? No, he said, but it's the only thing I have. She looked out at the trees with him, the dark shapes bending in the wind. After a while she spoke. You keep showing up. That's more than most men manage. He nodded. His eyes stayed on the horizon, but one of his hands dropped to his side, open, like an offer. Not asking, just there. She didn't take it, but she didn't walk away either. Inside, Samuel poured himself another drink from a flask he hadn't offered to share. The real storm was still coming. The storm hit 2 days later, not from the sky but from within. It started quiet as most trouble does. A missing rooster, a spilled sack of seed, a few coins gone from the Gerald knot kept beneath the flour tin. Nothing to lie, nothing she could prove, just enough to sour the air. Ward said nothing. He watched. Samuel played dumb, whistled more than usual, and spent long stretches out of sight. When Ona asked where Hed been, he shrugged and sat around, like that was a place worth being. Then on the 3rd day, Caleb came back from checking the north pasture with a torn sleeve and blood on his knuckles. Ilna met him on the porch, heart already in her throat. What happened? Caleb looked past her. His face was pale, mouth tight. He grabbed me. Who? Caleb jerked his chin toward the barn. Uncle Sam said I was spying on him. Told me to mind my own. When I didn't, he shoved me. Called me a little bastard. And his breath left her in a rush. She steadied herself on the doorframe. She hadn't hit anyone in her life, never had to. But her hands curled into fists. Ward came up the path just then, pitchfork over his shoulders, sweat darkening his shirt. He took one look at Caleb's face, and the air shifted. Who did this? He asked. Caleb didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Ward set the pitchfork down with care. Then he walked into the barn. Ilna followed, chest tight, voice stuck. Samuel was on the back step, chewing jerky like nothing mattered. Ward didn't raise his voice. You touched the boy? Samuel stood up slow. I shoved him. He was nosing around. You raise a hand in this house again, Ward said, quiet, calm, and I will put you down. Samuel snorted. You think you scare me, Drifter? I don't need to scare you. Then Samuel swung. It was clean. It wasn't planned. Just a sudden, ugly punch that missed Ward's jaw and caught him on the neck. Ward staggered but didn't fall. He didn't even look surprised. He just stepped forward and knocked Samuel flat with one punch to the gut. Samuel gasped, curling on the dirt like a slug poured with salt. Ward knelt beside him. You're done here. Samuel wheezed. She's my sister. You're a coward, Ward said. And a thief. Elma stepped forward then, her voice slow. You leave tonight. You don't come back. Samuel's eyes found hers, full of something twisted, wounded pride, self-pity, the useless anger of a man who's never been good at anything but breaking things. You'll regret this, he muttered. No, she said. I already regret letting you in. That night after he was gone, the house felt hollow in a new way. The children were quiet, unsure. Caleb would lend me her eyes. Ilna sat with him on the edge of his cot. You did nothing wrong, she said. I should have told you sooner. You told me when it mattered. Ward didn't come inside right away. She found him out back, sitting on the log by the empty chicken coop, hands clasped like a man in prayer, though his head was up and his eyes were open. You all right? She asked. He nodded slow. I didn't come here to make things worse. You didn't. He looked at her, really looked. You sure? She sat beside him. The night was warm enough to leave coats behind. My whole life, she said, I've been waiting for someone to come along who could carry the hard things without running. You stayed. He didn't answer right away. Then, I want to keep staying, if you'll have me. Ilna stared ahead, into the dark. You got no land, no name worth writing, nothing but a quiet voice and a good heart. He waited, and then she smiled, small, tired but real. That's more than I started with. They sat in silence until the stars came out. Not many, but enough. Inside, Ruthie still held the carved horse. Amos breathed in rhythm with the wind, and Ilna knew something had changed. Not just the house, not just the man. The days that followed settled into a kind of peace Ona hadn't known she was missing. Not loud or sweeping, just small steady comforts. Shoes lined up by the door, Caleb laughing again without glancing over his shoulder, Ward standing behind her at the well, offering the rope without a word. Spring rooted deep. Buds formed on the cottonwoods. The hens laid more regular. Even Ruthie's cough quieted. One morning Ona stood by the clothesline, pinning a damp sheet to the wind. Her hands moved automatically, grip, full, pin, but her mind was far off. Not anxious, not burdened, just still. Ward came up from the lower pastures, sleeves rolled to the elbow, dirt on his palms. Fence held through the rain, he said. That's a first. He stepped beside her, took the other corner of the sheet without being asked. I've been thinking, he said. There's a piece of land east of here, just past the ridge. Flat enough for wheat. I saw it when I rode out last week. She squinted at him. You thinking of farming now? He shrugged. I'm thinking of staying. The sheet whipped in the wind between them, snapping like something alive. I've got enough hands for the work I have, she said. You've got enough hands, he agreed, but not enough rest. She turned back to the house, watched the smoke curl lazy from the chimney. You was skinned to marry me, Ward. He smiled faint, like he hadn't meant to. I'm asking if you want to build something, not just fix what's already here. Her chest ached not with pain, but with the strange, unbearable lightness of hope. I don't need a man to save me, she said. I know. It'd only slow you down. She laughed then. A short, surprised thing. He grinned, and they stood there a moment, the sheet flapping between them like a flag neither had the courage to raise. Later that evening, after the children were fed and the dishes dried, Ona found him out back again. Same log, same quiet. She sat beside him, a bundle in her lap. She unfolded it carefully. Inside was a small silver ring, her wedding ring. She hadn't worn it in months. I kept it because it felt wrong to let go, she said, like it'd be forgetting. He didn't speak. But I'm not forgetting, she went on. I'm changing, and that's not the same. She looked at him full. I want to build something too, with you. His shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in relief. Like something he'd been holding finally let go. I don't have much to offer, he said. You've got enough. He reached out slowly, like asking a question without words. She placed the ring in his hand. Not as a replacement, she said, as a beginning. That night he slept inside, not by the fire, not in the corner, in the same bed where two hearts had once broken, now laid bare for something new to take root. The children accepted it in their quiet way. Caleb nodded once when Ward came to breakfast and poured 2 cups instead of 1. Ruthie climbed into his lap without hesitation. The house didn't feel less empty. It felt fuller. By late spring they started clearing the east plot. Together, her hands, his back, the children's feet running through wild grass that hadn't yet been tamed. No vows had been spoken, no preacher summoned, but something stronger had been laid down, and it held. The past did not disappear. It folded itself into the soil. Grief, failure, forgiveness, seeds planted for something new. On the first morning of June, Ilna stood at the door with Ward beside her. The sun rose slow over the ridge, lighting the fields gold. Inside, the cabin smelled of bread, smoke, and sleep. Her hand brushed his. It stayed there, and the day began. The horizon holds more, subscribe to see it.